Something really interesting is happening in the world of gaming right now. And it's not about the next big console or, shinier graphics. It's something deeper. It's a fundamental shift that's happening inside our heads, inside the minds of gamers. And it's totally changing what it even means to play.
So let's just get right to it and ask a pretty provocative question. Are we, as gamers, losing our strategic edge? Are we losing our taste for that deep, complex thinking? Now, that might sound like just another hot take, right? But believe it or not, there's a huge new pile of data that suggests this isn't just an idea. It's a real, measurable trend.
So where's all this evidence coming from? Well, it's from a massive study by a research firm called Quantic Foundry. And when I say massive, I mean it. They didn't just pull a few hundred people. Nope, they surveyed over 1.5 million gamers over the course of 9 years. That gives us this incredibly clear long-term picture of how our motivations for gaming have really changed.
Okay, so before we dive into the numbers, let's get on the same page about what we mean by strategy. It's basically the appeal of thinking long-term, planning things out, being careful with your decisions, and the researchers have this awesome metaphor for it. Imagine a whiteboard in your mind. A really big whiteboard means you love mapping out complex, multi-step plans. A smaller one? Well, that means you'd much rather just react in the moment.
And here's the result. Look at this chart. Back in 2015, the average gamer's preference for strategy was, well, perfectly average, right at the 50th percentile. But by 2024, it absolutely plummeted down to the 33rd. Just let that sink in for a second. That means that today, 2/3 of all gamers have less interest in strategy than the average gamer did just 9 years ago. That is a huge drop.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. A drop to the 33rd percentile? It sounds kind of abstract, right? It's hard to grasp what that really means. So, to really drive home the sheer scale of this change, the researchers gave us some pretty powerful real-world comparisons.
Okay, for our first comparison, picture this. What if every single adult man in the United States just lost 19 pounds? That's the kind of massive population-wide shift we're talking about here.
Or, how about this? It's also the same as every adult man on the entire planet shrinking by over 1 inch in height, just gone.
And maybe the most stunning comparison of all, this is like everyone on Earth losing 6.6 IQ points. I mean, wow. We're not talking about a small dip here, folks. This is a seismic shift in how we prefer to think.
So what on earth could cause a change this huge? I mean, the most obvious suspect for pretty much any big societal change recently is the COVID-19 pandemic. That's gotta be it, right?
Well, it turns out the timeline tells a totally different story. The decline didn't just pop up in 2020. When you look at the data, the trend was already clearly happening way back in 2015. Sure, the pandemic might have sped things up a bit, but it definitely wasn't the root cause. This is something much bigger, and it's been going on for a while.
Okay, so if it's not a single event like the pandemic, maybe it's the people. Maybe there's a whole new type of gamer out there who's throwing off the average. Well, the data says, nope, not that either. The decline is incredibly consistent across the board. Men, women, US gamers, non-US gamers. It's happening to everyone. The plot thickens.
All right, so if it's not a specific event and it's not a change in who is playing the games, then the cause has to be coming from somewhere else. It's got to be something from outside of gaming entirely. We need to start looking at the bigger cultural shifts that are affecting all of us.
And once you start looking outside of gaming, you realize this decline in strategy isn't happening in a vacuum. It actually lines up perfectly with this well-documented trend of our collective attention spans just shrinking. Think about it. YouTube videos are getting shorter and shorter just to keep us watching. Movie scenes have gone from an average of 16 seconds per shot down to just 4. And the average time we can even focus on a single window on our computer has dropped from 2.5 minutes to just 47 seconds. We are constantly jumping from one thing to the next.
And all of this leads to the researchers' main theory. All this constant stimulation, the emotional drain from social media and our digital lives, it's creating this state of cognitive overload. To put it really simply, by the time we actually sit down to play a game, we might just be too mentally fried to want to do any deep strategic thinking.
So if we're all walking around with our mental batteries already drained before we even grab a controller, well, that totally changes why we play in the first place. So the real question now is, what are we even looking for from our games anymore?
And this is where we see a really crucial shift, and it's backed up by other research too. There's this psychological split, right? On one side, you have playing to win. That's all about competition, mastery, and it's actually linked to increased anxiety. On the other side, you have playing to relax, just focusing on enjoyment, on relieving stress, and that's linked to emotional well-being. So in this crazy, overloaded world, which one of those sounds better to you?
And look, this isn't just some academic theory. This quote from a Reddit user just hits the nail on the head. They said, "Gamers I know, including myself, play games to decompress more than to stimulate." And that's it, right there. The motivation is shifting away from needing stimulation, like curing boredom, and towards decompression. We're looking for an escape, a way to just have fun and unwind, not another mental workout.
So, what does all this mean for the future of games? Well, it suggests there's a whole new set of rules for what we, as players, actually want. First, less cognitive overload. We're actively avoiding games that feel like a second job. Second, shorter time horizons. You know, planning a few steps ahead is cool, but planning hundreds of moves in advance? No thanks. And finally, simpler decisions. Games with fewer things to keep track of are just more appealing now.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really big question that honestly goes way beyond just gaming. It's about our whole relationship with our free time, with leisure itself. In a world that is constantly demanding more and more of our attention, what do we now demand from our moments of play?